Tonight, we have an episode on 7 where we're going to be discussing 7 prospects post the Senior Bowl on defense whose draft stock has went up or down. Hey guys, it's Joshua Klein of the Draft Beard Podcast. Tonight, it is an episode of 7 on 7 where we're going to be talking about 7 players on the defensive side of the ball who've seen their draft stock go up or down post the Senior Bowl. And we're going to get started tonight with the defensive line. So if you know anything about this year's draft class, this defensive line class, whether it's edge rushers or interior defensive line, is absolutely loaded. And there are some good ones. And going into this Senior Bowl, there was a couple defensive linemen who needed to answer themselves some questions on would they be able to perform against some of the top competition in this year's upcoming draft class. We're going to get started with one of my absolute favorite players in this year's draft class, and that is Marshall defensive end Mike Green. So Mike Green is a really good player who had a fantastic season production-wise with 17 sacks. He also had a 91.4 pass rush grade and a 90.2 rush defensive grade with a 20% pass rush win rate. And those stats are all per PFF. He was phenomenal. I know Marshall's from a smaller school, but he played really well against Ohio State. He played well against Virginia Tech. So he played good against the better competition that he had this season. And he's a guy who has an explosive first step, really good bend. Now, he doesn't have this prototypical size you'd like to see from the defensive end position, but he has great production in college. So as we come into the Senior Bowl, Mike Green absolutely bolstered his NFL draft stock with an outstanding performance at the 2025 Senior Bowl. As you see the video that's went around social media in draft circles that went viral, his absolute overpowering performance in the one-on-one drills against Oregon's Josh Conerly, that was just an absolute amazing play for Mike Green. He was dominant throughout the Senior Bowl. He addressed some of those concerns that scouts might have had. But can he hold up at his size against some of the top competition on the offensive line in this year's draft class? He was so good. He didn't even play in the Senior Bowl game. He basically packed it up after a couple of days and said, we have done our job. And he has shown that he has the ability to be a top-notch prospect in this draft. I fully anticipate that he's going to be a mid-day one, maybe earlier, maybe a little later. Draft stock is where I see him being drafted in this year's NFL draft. He's a guy I really like, really impressed with him. It's not going to fit every team's scheme, but I think the comp to a Von Miller type style of player, I hate player comping one for one because it's not fair to say that he will be a Von Miller player in production, but I think that style and usage is where I see Mike Green. Really like them, and he is definitely moving up the draft boards. The next guy that had an absolute phenomenal Senior Bowl is Shemar Stewart out of Texas A&M. Now, he is the opposite of defensive end Mike Green out of Marshall in the terms that Green had the production and not your typical size, but Shemar has the prototypical size you look for in a defensive end, but does not have the production. So in his college career, he only recorded 12 tackles for loss, and 4 sacks, just over 4 sacks over his college career. So the production does not match what you see from Mike Green, but you see the absolute prototypical size in Shemar Stewart. Shemar Stewart being 6'5", I think he measured at an 83.5-inch wingspan at the Senior Bowl. But he is a player who also came in needing to answer some questions, and he absolutely did. He was dominant in one-on-one drills. He was able to convert speed to power effectively. One scout per the Bleacher Report said that he's stamped himself as maybe the best player on the defensive side of the ball at the Senior Bowl. He is having himself a really good draft process here. And again, another player who I like, who I think is solidified himself as a definite first-round draft pick. Where he goes, is it early? Is it mid to first round? We'll see as the draft process continues. But he is a guy who has really improved his draft stock I know the production isn't there. I don't see him with the Trayvon Walker type catapult all the way up to the very top of the draft boards, but he is a guy who I think with his ability, he's a guy you want to take a shot at because he has seen the ability to get pressure. That is one thing. His pressures are really good. You do see him move tackles back into the pocket, causing some issues for the opposing team's quarterback. So he just doesn't have the ability in college, has shown the ability to finish off the plays. So Shamar Stewart's another guy who has been flying up the draft boards with a great Senior Bowl performance. The next guy in my list is Toledo defensive tackle Darius Alexander. He improved his draft stock at the Senior Bowl. Throughout the week, he showed his versatility, played both outside and inside. He showed his powerfulness. He is a big guy. He is. Oh, we'll edit this part. He is 6'4", 206. Darius Alexander is 6'4", 305 pounds, just a behemoth of a player. He's out of Fort Wayne, Indiana, played at the University of Toledo. He is explosive off the snap. He's like a tank. He has a really good blend of mass. He's like built in a lab. He performs very well in what Scott's called that telephone booth. Now he's 25 years old, so he's a little bit older of a prospect, but he had a really good Senior Bowl. He recorded a tackle for loss against Kansas running back Devin Neal in the game. He performed very well in one-on-one drills. I definitely think he has solidified himself as a day 2 pick. Some people will say that he's come in as maybe a late first round grade. I don't know if I see that happening. We'll see as we get into the combine how well he tests. But he had a phenomenal week, really improved his draft stock. He is a guy I really like and is pushing himself into the upper tiers of the defensive line class. Now, one of the next guys I like is Quincy Riley from Louisville. Now, he had a really good Senior Bowl. You got to remember, these Senior Bowl events are not shaped up, or you're not positioned as a cornerback to perform well, right? These drills are meant to look wide receivers look better. That's kind of how they're designed. He was dominant. He was sticky all week. He was able to neutralize a lot of the top receivers that he went up against in the Senior Bowl. He was one of the top defensive back, if not the top defensive back at the Senior Bowl. Now, he does not have great size. Quincy Riley is only about 5'11". He's not thin. He's a little thicker. The things that you like about him, he has exceptional ball skills. That's the thing that scouts are going to like about him. You're really going to have to go back and reevaluate that tape, because that tape didn't necessarily show a corner that you were going to look for on day 2. Maybe he's moved himself up into that discussion, but he showed the ability that maybe he can play on the outside. I'm not sure he's going to be good in the nickel. He's not a really good run defender. He's a willing tackler, but he's not the greatest tackler. Over his career, he had 15 interceptions, which shows that ball hawking ability. Those are things that scouts and teams love. Can he make that transition into the NFL? Probably more of a zone corner. Don't see him necessarily as the man-on-man pressing corner, but he did show the ability against these top wide receivers that you're going to see in this year's draft class, that, hey, maybe there's a little bit more there than what we've seen on film at the University of Louisville this year. Another guy that I liked in his draft stock has went up is Oluwaleme Oladejo, and that is the edge rusher out of UCLA. He had a really, really good week. He showed his versatility. He played linebacker at UCLA until this season, where he did move over to edge. And in his final season, he recorded 57 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, and 4.5 sacks over those 12 games. But at the Senior Bowl, he really excelled in those one-on-one drills. It looks like it's given him the ability to show that he has that versatility. He's played linebacker before. He can play edge. He plays like a heat-seeking missile. He can play in coverage. Does he have a lot of the pass rush moves that you'd like to see? No, because he's only played edge for 1 year. But I think what it did is it moved him up maybe to an early day 3 pick for someone who thinks that they can use him in versatile role, maybe a situational pass rusher, also playing at linebacker while he learns the position of edge rusher. He had a good season for his first season at edge rusher. So I think that he's improved his draft stock. He's at least put his name in the conversation. If he improves throughout the draft season, performs well at the combine, I think he's a guy who can maybe sneak into day two, but at least he showed that, yeah, I'm just draftable player. I can play edge, and I look forward to seeing where he ends up and where he gets drafted. Now we're going to move back over to the defensive line. That I had two players here who did not improve their draft stock at the Senior Bowl, and that is Kentucky defensive end Deone Walker. He is a behemoth at 6'7", over 330 pounds, but his tape in 2024 was not as consistent as you saw from his 2023 tape. Going into the season, he was kind of seen as a first-round draft pick type player. Some even may have saw him as a top 15 pick, but his inconsistency, his inability to utilize his pad level, his conditioning concerns, he is a guy who I see falling in the draft. I still think he could be a day two pick because a team will look at him and say, look, he is just a physical specimen. And we've seen things on tape in his 2023 season that we think that maybe we can get out of him. So I don't think he's seen his draft stock fall into day three at this point. I do think someone will probably take him in day two, but the days of him being seen as a first round type graded player, he just did not help himself at all. He also had an injury during the week as well. You have those injury concerns, those conditioning concerns, and the difference in what you've seen on the tape from 2023 to 2024. It's just not looking good for Deone Walker as establishing himself as a guy who could be picked in the first round. Another guy I want to highlight that did not have the greatest week in improving his draft stock, and that's Landon Jackson, the defensive end out of Arkansas. He is a guy I just want to like. He has your prototypical size at 6'6". He's around 264 pounds, but he is just an edge setting defensive end. He was inconsistent during the week. You saw flashes of some good stuff, right? He was in some impressive performances throughout the week, but he also just didn't show that bend. He's very upright. He is basically a edge setting, run defending defensive end. And like scouts have said that I've heard that, you can teach guys to defend the run, but you just can't teach those guys to just have the natural ability or the already the developed ability to be a pass rusher. And so Landon, I don't think improved his draft stock. I think he's a guy that you might see go late day two, given the depth of the edge rushing class in this year's draft. He's a guy that it's going to get pushed down in those tiers because you just have so many guys in this draft class who have shown a really good propensity to be a great pass rusher in college. So I think with the amount of players that are available in this draft in that position, that's going to move Landon Jackson down. There's just not as much of a demand for edge setting only defensive ends. Even though I like him, I think he could turn into be a solid pro. He's the guy I think is falling into that from maybe that late first round draft area, maybe to that mid to late day two. So, maybe looking at a third round pick is where I'm kind of seeing him right now. But thank you so much for enjoying the episode and watching it all the way through. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share with all your friends. This is the defensive episode for 7 on 7 of the Draft Beard podcast. And have a great night.
The Draft Beard podcast.